The Quarantine Sessions podcast with J. Cole.
Hey, bro.
Hey,
How's it going, man?
good.
Welcome
Good
to
morning.
this, your first live on Instagram.
This
I'm really
feels really
honored
exciting.
to be the one to pop your Instagram live cherry.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah, man, it's an honor to have you here too. I've been a big fan of your music for a while. I've seen Fanna Fi-Allah perform several times. I think a kind of peak experience for me seeing you guys perform was at the Eclipse Festival in Oregon. But have always just been blown away by your music, and it really gets me to a higher state of consciousness. And I really appreciate everything that you're doing to revive this ancient Sufi musical art form.
Thank you.
And yeah, I was hoping that you could share a little bit with me and with our listeners just about how you got onto this path of performing Qawwali music and devoting your life to this beautiful spiritual form of music, and what has kind of led to your path in this unique way.
Yeah. Well, first off, Qawwali music is a very ancient devotional genre of mystic music from India and Pakistan, and it's been around for about 1,000 years now. And so it's very highly evolved in that way that the grand masters of old have developed and channeled these keys to the heart through poetry and sound. And there's been this unbroken lineage for, so many generations now. And, me and the group hearing this music just really fell in love with it because it touched that place, that we all yearn for, that place of like connection and emotional depth and devotion in such a way like nothing else. So
Mm.
over the past 20 years, the group and us, like sharing it worldwide in, from music festivals to, the Indian and Pakistani community all over the world to alternative communities and all that. So it's been a big journey of, holding that tradition in this new era and in an international way to have a place, what we call the Mehfil Sama, which is like that sacred gathering of people to be in that devotional place. And like I said, just having a form that's been evolved for so long to be able to share that in it is really special. So we carry it with a lot of love and integrity.
Mm. And have you always been a musician? And how did you find Qawwali music? What was your exposure to that?
I wasn't like naturally good at music, but when I was a young teen and in the whole like searching phase, I was really drawn into Indian classical music. I was like 13, 14,
Wow, cool.
hearing the Beatles and the Incredible String Band and Quintessence and all these groups from like the psychedelic era, and hearing like tampuras and sitars and sarangis and sarods and all that in the music, and just hearing those sounds and be like, oh, what are those really mystical sounds? They're so beautiful. And so it led me quickly to find, the classical music and delve very deep into that early in life, and yeah, start to study it.
Mm, amazing. And can you tell me a little bit just about the history of Qawwali and what it means to be a Qawwali musician in this time?
Well, it's the tradition is very strong in Pakistan, especially, after partition in 1947. A lot of the Muslim and Sufi musicians migrated to Pakistan. So that's where most of the lineages continue now, 80 some years later. And so, as referred to earlier, this Mehfil Sama is this gathering. So, and they go all night, and people from any caste or creed or gender or religion or age or wealth group can attend these. They're very universal, in that whole Sufi um, vibe, the universal spirituality thing. And so it's a big part of their culture there, where, there's people struggle with a lot of things in life in these kind of countries. And as we do in any country, but, they have their own struggles, either socially or spiritually. And so these become these containers where people can come and have like these emotional, catharsis, and also, go deep into that spiritual world and just take a break from everything else that's going on in life. And, in some ways, the Western cultures are more oppressed. In some ways, the Eastern cultures are more oppressed. But you have that especially for, women that don't have the same freedom of expression outside of the home space in Pakistan or in India, in the Muslim world. So the Sama, the spiritual gathering, the ceremony becomes a place for that, like I said, catharsis and that emotional release. So you see people like crying and whirling and going into trance and all that, and it'll be this whole night ceremony. And the poetry is very profound and very moving, as well as the music. So it's, like I said, this evolved container for that. And we're trying to carry that on into all the unique places we've been going with it, and remembering, the ethics and the whole container of that, and try to slowly, well, it's been 20 years now, so there's been a lot of development in that way of introducing people to it throughout the world, so that we can, have a container for that and pass on the great wisdom of these masters and of the culture itself that surrounded it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think that now the world needs access to those transcendent experiences to recognize our unity more than ever. And yeah, music is one of the most powerful ways to communicate that, certainly. It's also beautiful because I think that Qawwali music is still relatively obscure in places like the United States. And I think that what you're doing with your band is to really help to bring some of that culture into these places where it's not as well known or as accessible. I was watching this movie Baraka last night, which is really beautiful, and that and the other film, I forget the name of the director that created it, Samsara, is a really beautiful depiction of kind of like it's without any narrative or any dialogue, but I feel like that movie kind of shows the commonalities of humanity, and it puts a lot of emphasis on kind of, it shows a lot of the rituals around and ceremonies around spirituality, like how people find this transcendental place and what comes out of it, and has these long pan footage of mosques and of churches and things like that. And it's very obvious and very apparent that that transcendental experience has always been one of the most important parts of human culture. That that's something that we've always yearned for and that we've always had access to, and whatever that experience is, and all the vast multiplicity of ways that you can reach that experience, it's like the most important thing and like the most sacred thing that we've encountered. When we can get into a state of consciousness that transcends our individuality, that transcends our gender, our race, our culture, that transcends time and space, and just merge with that the greater aspect of what it is to be alive. And anything that promotes that, if it's a kind of music or a kind of art, I think is just so needed in these times.
Aho, truly. Well said.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm curious about your own experiences. Like, what's it like when you're up there singing and paying devotion through your art and through your music?
Well, to use like the Bali word, um, channeling, it's kind of like that's what we um, set ourselves up for. Like you were talking about that transcendence experience where we can, at least for a moment or for a window, put ourselves to the side, all of our struggles, all of our like judgments and opinions, all of our yearnings and strivings, and put them aside for a moment to be able to be in that state of devotion. And it's like a reboot, and it's a reconnection to the ultimate, to God, to the beloved. And as the Sufis explain, there's multiple stages in that of what we call Fana, hence the name of our grouping, Fanna Fi-Allah, where it's that annihilation or that transcendence of the separate personality, to be able to be present with with what is, with Haq, with the truth, with God, or whatever language one wants to use for that. And so the practice of Qawwali, whether it's the listener or the group, it's a very communal experience, which I like, because the group is big and the gathering is it's a communal experience, which
Mhm.
really drew me into it, because I had been, in my late teens living in the Himalayas as a renunciate, and a lot of years spent alone in caves and meditation and all that. So it was a great um, testament to the power of communal devotion when people come together with that common intention, and how when voices come together and intentions come together and people's like spiritual power of presence come together, yeah, it's very effective. So being on stage or being at a sama or whatever context it is, it has that power when everybody can let themselves phase out of the forefront for a moment and just be consumed in that devotion, just in the emotional power of the verses and in the music itself. And now that we've been doing it for so long, for so many years, and played like 1,500 or more concerts and all that, it happens quite quickly. And we all have our
Wow.
issues, issues with each other, issues with our lives, issues with ourselves, issues with our culture. But somehow when we sit down all together, we know that space and we recognize it and can let go of all those anxieties and just be present in that prayer. And it's a very, very blessed experience. And it's Qawwali is so animated and so big on all levels that it magnetizes the audience and the listeners into that same presence quite quickly. So before long, there's a very communal sense of like really profound presence and devotion that happens. Yeah, it's precious. Hence, like,
Wow.
traveling all over the world to be able to have that experience again and again.
Yeah, wow. That's a cool life path to choose for yourself, to be able to be in contact with that so frequently. Yeah, I think what you were saying is important, is that we all have our kind of human issues, like we all have our own mess that's our life, and that's connected to the greater social web, and that's connected to the world at large and society. But there are these practices that you can participate in that help you to transcend that. So it's not that that stuff goes away, but your consciousness transcends it to a point where in those moments you are connected to a larger perspective. It's like you're seeing from the mountaintop, and you're not as in that that sort of individual struggle. And I think that that's really powerful, and I think that that's something that the world needs now as much as ever, if not more. And doing that and providing that, and you being a holder for that, and to create a container for people to realize those states of consciousness, is so valuable, especially in a communal setting where people of all different genders or backgrounds or races or caste or religion can come together and share this experience of transcendence and unity and a higher state of consciousness.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, truly.
I'm really curious to hear also about your experiences. You were talking about you spent a lot of time in the Himalayas in isolation. How long were you in isolation for, and what was that experience like? What motivated you to do that?
Well, it's only been my close friends that have really heard about that time, because I don't want to like, toot my own conch around it too much. But it's been recently now that with the episode one of our Qawwali film series, Music of the Mystics, that it touches in because I'm the main narrator and the voice behind the film, as has happened recently. But there's a whole section about what really drew me to Qawwali, and like I said, that communal power of devotion inside of a container of a tradition that's evolved seamlessly for so long. And as in the film, I explained how my upbringing was a bit abusive with my father, so I always tried to avoid my family when I was coming of age, and so spend a lot of time in nature, just trying to be away from the house like all day to avoid, having to be in confrontation with my family in a way that was painful. So I guess I got used to being on my own a lot and in nature a lot, and in that time, seeking direction and seeking inspiration. I was studying a lot of the ancient scriptures, also because my social skills weren't very good. So, yeah, it didn't give me the opportunity to have like heaps of friends and be cool. I mean, I was probably, pretty cool, obviously, but just very not in the box
Obviously.
of not in the bubble or in the box of what was in at the time or what friends were up to at the time. So, but because of all that antagonism and all that difference, it really drew me within to find my own path and to find my own direction, not be as influenced, I guess, of what was happening in my age group and in Nova Scotia, Canada at the time. So, yeah, what really moved me most of all, although I was reading, the scriptures of the Sufis, Rumi and Hafiz and Jami and all that at the time, it was the yogic scriptures like the Upanishads and the Sanskrit scriptures, Vedanta, um, Sri Shankara, and all that. So I decided to, leave the world and get rid of all my possessions and move to India. So I went there with a one-way ticket when I was 16 and spent the next 5 years living as like a wandering mendicant between India and Tibet. And so I didn't have possessions. I just had, my blanket, my water pot, and, lived in caves and did pilgrimages and spent a lot of time on my own practicing meditation as passed down in the knowledge of the scriptures. And yeah, it was a very, very powerful inward strengthening, character building time, you could say. But I had never found like my spiritual guru, you could say, until I found my music teacher actually. And so that really drew me into the power of music. And in that time, it was classical Indian music, which is, one and the same with that of Qawwali music.
Wow. Yeah, that's so amazing, man. And that's so radically, it's so rebellious against the culture because I think that in Western culture, if you're American or Canadian, we're we have certain values ingrained in us that is a lot of ego and it's a lot of materialism and about consumption and all of that. And to do something like that is just it's a radical divergence from the culture, the dominant culture that you were brought up in. And yeah, I'm curious if you're open to speaking more about that. I'm curious about what how that influenced your consciousness and how that has changed how you see the world now from before you began that journey. If that's something that you feel you can articulate in any way.
There's so many perspectives and so many apertures of awareness to go with that. Like one thing that's really I could say I learned from that is, in life we avoid what's uncomfortable, avoid what is painful, what has been painful, what we call samskaras in
Hmm.
that yogic culture. And it becomes a loop. So we're kind of stuck in doing the same thing and searching for the same thing in the same places again and again, trying to call back those experiences that were really pleasant and pleasurable. And in that experience of being in asceticism where I couldn't just like eat a pear or have a hot bath or turn on a light or sleep in a bed or all those things. It just put me in that place to be able to see past the what I thought I wanted and what I thought I needed to be happy, and source it from a much deeper place within, and really follow that stream of consciousness, feeling, emotion, thought, all that, the psychological inward studies of yoga. So that's been really powerful. And also in relation to the story that I said about having a really hard upbringing, an abusive father, and just being really going against the grain or the current of what my current culture was. It's a lesson in when we're avoiding something, whether it's talking to somebody about something or being in a circumstance or situation that we think we don't like. I realize more and more just in experience that it's these hard experiences that can also propel us into those places we really want to be, like you were saying, transcendent consciousness, or just to evolve and transform in ways and to be greater and to be different and experience things from a new light. So those things that push us back can also help us to like transcend over to get to another plateau of experience. Like one thing that's what I noticed, like say in India, Qawwali is there, Indian classical music is there, and for the most part, people are encouraged that music is an awesome thing. And in the devotional path, like especially the bhakti tradition of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whether it's like the Hare Krishna or just Krishna devotion or any kind of like devotional music that is big there. There's all this like, just chant and be happy, and chant at the mandir, at the the temple, and chant under the tree at the wedding, or this whole thing. And what you notice is there's a lot of good music, but there's a lot of like really badly sung music in India as well as good music. Well, something that's unique about Pakistan that people don't know, because Pakistan has a pretty bad rep, but there's this whole like pushback from the recent like Islamic, more fundamentalist kind of perspective on things, right? So because of that, people that really feel the value of sacred music have to transcend that, have to like spring past that. They have to really want it. They have to really feel it, and it has to mean a lot to them. So there's less music. There's still a lot of music, a lot of sacred music, and like I said, there's a whole culture around it. But there's all those people that have had to really pursue and persist and break through those like judgments and those cultural standards, have become such great artists because of it. So it's not saying that musicians are better in India or better in Pakistan, but it's saying that I think that antagonism that people think like, oh, that's really awful that a lot of Muslims say that music is haram or forbidden or has no spiritual value, is completely secular and all that stuff, or like often people say it like it like evokes the senses of the lower regions, or however one wants to say it. But yeah, so what it does is it gives you that sense of like, wow, when something is really hard and it's not just given to you on a silver platter, there's one that is ready, can really take the steps to reach it from a much higher point of like enthusiasm and depth, if you know what I
I
mean.
I can't imagine a world without music. That's not a world I would want to live in. I think music is just one of the most incredible experiences that we're privileged to have in a human form.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah, you were talking a bit about this this conflict, um, these social conflicts that exist in Pakistan and in India. I'm curious to learn more about that because I'm actually not that well educated about that situation.
Yeah, it's fascinating actually, and it's been a huge debate for for eons. And I'm pretty tired of the debate in a lot of ways, but I really I really find it fascinating, like to be able to understand where it comes from the best that I can. Because, you know, as a Westerner, as like a 40-year-old person, it's easy to just be like, oh, that's just lame that they say music is not permissible in a spiritual context within Islam. You know, just from a face value, it's like WTF. But then
Hmm.
we look at how the container has grown and how it has like evolved through certain ethics in place. And you know, because I didn't grow up in that culture. I got initiated into Sufism when I was 17 and came at it from a very different angle. But yeah, it really makes me wonder about what's behind all of it. It's fascinating, and basically, historically speaking, to give a little overview, historically, the Sufis were the ones that brought Islam and Sufism to the Indian subcontinent, which you know at that time was included, you know, Pakistan and Bangladesh and all that. So the Sufis brought it, and since the Sufis have been very universal and very like open-minded and not very rigid on the external stuff, they really connected their message and their poetry and the whole vibe of like universal divine love to the culture of India. So that's why Qawwali music, the music itself, is Indian, while the poetry and a lot of the unique emotion and setting around it comes from further west, from 1,000 years ago, from Persian and Arabic cultures. And so basically, the Sufis brought Islam to India and Pakistan. About 1,000 years ago, there was this master, Data Ganjabaksh Ali Hajveri, who wrote this beautiful scripture, the Kashif Majhub in Persian, which I've read, and that also it puts down like the essential ethics on the Sama, the spiritual gathering, and Qawwali, and what it means to be a Darvish and a Sufi, and all this really cool stuff back in that really roots era. I really like the vibe. And he talks about that whole thing about permissibility of music. And I don't remember what word he used, but he said if somebody just creates like a black and white opinion of it, of music is wrong or music is right, it's never gonna solve the debate, because you can never make like a cold hard one-sided opinion on something like that. It's completely subjective, and it's completely um, relative to the circumstance, which I thought was really beautiful the way he put it together. But anyway, so in those first Sufi masters that came to the subcontinent, they created this whole sama, this whole unique spiritual container in India at that time, and it evolved and evolved and evolved and evolved and evolved and evolved. And only recently, for the most part, in the last generation or so, there's been more of those like more strict facets of Islam that have very strong judgments against other people according to their own personal freaking opinions, which is like, yeah, it's not healthy for the rest of the world, because they're, you know, putting down other people for what they do. And then so just recently there's this whole debate, and it's in Pakistan and India, where in that land Sufism and Islam came in that container of the sama, of the music, of the poetry. So it's really strange that, you know, there's like 30, 40 years of debate about it, like almost 1,000 years later, and people have that music and that poetry and that universal spiritual vibe in their blood and in their land. So it's a hard debate to really pull there, but yeah, there is that debate of whether it's permissible. And the typical thing is that, you know, people that are from that culture that love Qawwali and appreciate the Sama and the Sufis and that lineage will be like, is there somewhere in the Quran that it says that? Or in the Hadith or the Sunnah, like basically the original Islamic texts and wisdom? And there isn't. So you see in those debates, somebody's like, well, it's not in there, but you can watch this YouTube video of this like sheikh that says that it's, you know, like a master or whatever, says that it's not permissible because it, you know, influences the senses towards like wrong things and all that. So yeah, anyway, that's a abbreviation of the debate, but the music continues and the culture continues, and it is persecuted to a certain extent, more or less, and it's part of our mission to be able to carry that wisdom to the world, carry that wisdom of the masters, so that it does continue to flourish.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting, these different conflictual views, which is really where most of the conflicts come from in the world in general, whether they're political issues or they're religious issues. It's just two people having different ways of seeing things and not being able to communicate or really listen to another person to hear their views. You know, there's not enough openness for another person to be able to share their view or their opinion, and for it to be actually taken in by that other person, to be able to see where that person's coming from and to be able to discuss it in a way to find resolution. And it seems to me that, well, this has always gone on. That's always existed in the world, as far as I know. But it's certainly, there's a certain crescendo that's occurring right now in the world in most places, where there are these really radical divergences of people and their perspectives. And I'm not sure exactly what can be done to help alleviate that. You know, um, I think it's an issue of consciousness. I think it's people people seeing another group of people, and these kinds of boundaries that people draw around groups of people, in my opinion, is very arbitrary. And then saying, well, that's us, or that's them, and this is us. And that creates a separation. And through separation, you have conflict and war and all these other things. And whatever can help raise the consciousness of the world to a place where we stop making those distinctions and we start to be more radically inclusive of the world and all of its different groups of people, regardless of what people believe or regardless of what people look like or where they come from. It's just going to perpetuate.
Mm. Yeah, truly. It's just so much easier said than done, especially from our standpoint where we have our own, place to live and plenty of food and fresh air. And you've got to imagine a lot of these cultures that this music and this topic comes from, they're like in cities and things where people are living on top of each other. So there's more pressure there for people to be able to cooperate. And so when somebody's lifestyle is different than another, it's more in their face and it's more on top of them, and it affects them more. And it's hard to feel motivated in one's own path if somebody's got a different opinion right there in your face. So people are wanting to like create those bubbles of like mutual belief systems and mutual practices and ethics within their local environments a lot, and hence the whole nationalism around that of like, we're an Islamic state, or we're a Jewish state, or we're a Christian state, or we're like raw vegan in Ubud that practice yoga every day, whatever it is. People are naturally trying to create that bubble around them about what they want to attract and how they want to live, so they are affirmed in it and encouraged and inspired in it too.
Right. I guess there's something natural about wanting to be around like-minded people. And I think that, I mean, that's probably something that attracts both you and I to Ubud, is that there are a lot of like-minded people here, and that's why we choose to live here. And we just have a little bit more privilege and more space to be able to kind of manifest that circumstance in a way that's comfortable. But I guess a lot of people in the world don't have that freedom. But that seems to be something that's kind of ingrained in us, that tribal instinct to want to be around people that see the world in a similar way to us.
I heard something funny at my brother's circle the other day. People like talking about their spiritual practice here and what their next optimized plan of life is, what they eat, how they act, how long their meditation is in the morning. It's so classic. Huh? And
Right.
one entertaining point of view was like, somebody's like, I do this meditation so that only the people that come in contact with me are only equal or above my spiritual level. And it reminded me of this topic, but also, in the Sufis have that whole thing too sometimes that comes up inside of the whole false humility pretense you know, persona there of like always seek those like above you so that they can inspire you higher. And I'm like, well, listen, what happened when you were 13 and 15 and needing like spiritual guidance? You think these masters would just ignore you because you're like of some like lower vibration than you or something? Yeah, it's funny how it plays out, huh?
Yeah, I really think that right now the world needs people to speak to like like the lowest common denominator, because the whole world needs this reorientation of perspective right now. So it's not just for the kind of privileged few who can, it's a privilege to even be exposed to these kinds of spiritual traditions and paths. And I feel so blessed that my life path has taken me in such a way where, you know, Buddhist teachers were easily accessible to me, and things like that, to be able
Yeah.
to hear this stuff. But there's a lot of people that just don't have that at all. And those people also need their consciousness to be developed and to evolve, because yeah, it's just it's not going to work in such a way if you have a kind of like isolated pocket of the elite few who achieve some kind of quote unquote enlightenment, while the rest of the world is in separation and disrepair. It's like the world needs to equally find that state of consciousness to be able to coexist, because we are all one, you know. I mean, it sounds cheesy to say that, but it's true. It's like what happens in one place, it affects everywhere. So until there's kind of harmony cohesively throughout the world, there's not going to really be harmony anywhere.
Yeah, truly. I was looking at the comments here because I've got, it looks like my followers are also on this chat. Hi, followers. Thanks for following. There was one that was like, come to such and such. I was at Kari Sharif in Azad Kashmir. And I wanted to say that we were just in Kashmir not long ago, and in Pakistan side and in India side for a concert. And there was that whole, that huge mass shooting that happened in a school. Like we were about to play in Muzaffarabad on our Pakistan peace tour, and we were very close. We were in Islamabad at the time, and there was that huge mass shooting where like something like 200 children and teachers were killed in one day. So it was really serious. And I appreciate the invitation, and we'd love to get back to Kashmir soon. But it's like also at the same time, it's you got to be realistic of like when there's like a 9-person Qawwali ensemble touring through Pakistan for the 20th year, that there's a lot of challenges behind our opportunity to be at some of these places. And you know, we've been at shrines when there was like suicide bombings and different things that happened. And so I just want you all that want us to play in this town or that town, and you know, we've played in thousands of towns all throughout the subcontinents in that 20 years. But it's not as easy as you might imagine, and there's been plenty of challenges along the way. So just to respond to your message. Oh, and somebody wanted to hear a bit of Musta Must. Pa, pa ma ga ma pa da ne da wa ma pa ga re sa re ga re da ni sa. Dum must kalandar must dum must kalandar must. Eko vere de hai dam ali ali. Eko vere de hai dam ali ali. Sakhilal kalandar mast. Sakhi lal kalandar mast jule lal kalandar mast dum mast kalandar mast. That's for you, whoever requested that. And now look,
I love that song.
somebody's asking, chant Hare Krishna. Okay, let's keep up with our conversation though, Jay.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, I mean, it's been wild what's been going on in the US too, with all the riots and conflict. And it's like, it's scary, what's happening, and also triumphant. And it's a lot of things right now. It's bringing up like a lot of different emotions for me. And
Yeah.
something that comes up for me a lot is this kind of, I feel like a kind of yearning to want to help or to create change in the world. But it often feels overwhelming to do that, or to not know exactly where to start. I'm curious your perspective of what is something that somebody who's listening to this conversation could do that could help to create that global unity consciousness and could help make the world a more peaceful and harmonious place.
Yeah, there's a lot that could be said there, but I feel you. It feels like a very inspiring and enthusing time to be able to really reach out and use whatever spiritual powers we've developed for the benefit of all sentient beings in all places. And like I had a robot the other day send out a message to all my Facebook friends, and I made it look like it wasn't a robot, but it was a robot. Sorry about that. But it was saying that I hope you've seen our Qawwali film series because it's like my life project that I've spent 20 years doing. And since you're my friend, I really want you to check it out and tell me what you think because it's a big deal for me. And, you know, aside from everything that I heard back was, I can't believe you're promoting your film right now. There's like this, do you know what's going on in the world? And to me, the way the way that my response and reaction was to that was that, listen, we've been on like a 20-year like life encompassing mission to help social justice, in the places and the culture that we're most connected to. I don't live in the States much. We tour there sometimes, and maybe it feels like the center of the solar system to some people that live there. But listen, there's social justice challenges happening all the time, and that of like the persecution or of the music in it or gender and caste equality. This is what we've been doing our utmost to be able to bring awareness to, and not through our own opinions, but by um, offering the wisdom of the masters through this film. And it's touched thousands of people already in the first few weeks of its publication. So that brings me back to saying that when we see all this uprising against social injustice of inequality, whether it's the rich usurping the power of the less than rich, and all those things, or like minorities or people that have less than others, and we see that kind of uprising periodically in different cultures in different places at different times throughout our lifespan. And it's so essential that when we see those things that we can also receive it as an inspiration and a coaxing and a wooing for us to even give more energy to those things that we believe in. And when we see those injustices, like you were saying, from this point of view of having a lot, whether it's like having a family or having abundance, that we can not necessarily just use that to try to go into greater states of bliss through more better than you bowl smoothies and goji berries and all that kind of stuff. We can also, take a lot of time each day to be able to help to bring awareness to the places and bring abundance to those people that are struggling. And it's our duty. It's just the way it's been. A lot of the wisdom that's been passed down has been like that, from those that have been able to receive wisdom from the masters or through their life struggles and challenges and paths and all that. Those are the ones that have, like I said earlier, developed or channeled these amazing keys to realization and wisdom and universal knowledge that continue to grow for hundreds and thousands of years, that are so valuable, like what we've been tapping into and tuning into to the best of our ability. And so for all you out there, it's definitely a time of that. And it's also a time of like upheaval. And it's a time of seeing who we really are behind the veil of like going to work every day or being able to travel here or having such and such amount of income and all those things, or such and such amount of accessibility to food and clean air and social context and all that stuff. So it's an important time of growth, like you said.
Yeah. We have about 5 minutes left, just to give you some warning on the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that, this word apocalypse actually meaning the lifting of the veil. And I think that that's really what's happening in the world, in the United States, for example, like really seeing how the whole system is built upon oppression and systemic oppression. And people are really realizing that and waking up to it. And it's not so, it's quite obscured. It's like within the blood of the culture, and it's obscured, and it's not till people are educated to actually see what's going on to realize it. But I think that a lot of people on a mass scale are waking up to that now. And these kinds of conflicts and these social injustices have existed throughout human history. And I really hope that we can someday arrive at a place within our species where we're not killing each other and we're not fighting over, different groups of different races or different viewpoints. And I think that that's really an issue of consciousness, and whatever we can do that shifts people's awareness and people's consciousness to a place of seeing another person and another group of people as an extension of ourself, as this larger body of, God, if you want to call it that, or whatever your word is for that higher, that thing that's larger than yourself, rather than looking at it as two different groups that are separate, that are against each other. Until we get to that point of being able to see things in that way, there's always going to be war and conflict.
Oh, and you were referring to your inspirations around Buddhism too, and one of the most powerful teachings for me in that, and in my times in Tibet around the high Buddhist masters, was that perspective of approaching any struggle from that acceptance of. So the way that integrates for me a lot of the time is like, we have our close friends that we've, lived life with for long periods of time and been in challenging situations. And there's always those things we just hate about those people, like those few qualities, and like, why can't you just like not be like that in that way? And so that whole Buddhist teaching of like accepting them from where they are, and then we make our choice, like, do we want to hang out with this person? How do we want to interact with them? But from that point of acceptance. And I think that the macrocosm of that is accepting the way that the world is and the way people are. Yet it doesn't necessarily dampen that enthusiasm to want to grow and change and help bring awareness and wisdom to the planet. But if we're just like cranky and frustrated, which is like, what you see a lot on social media feeds and in the news and things like that, it's going to be so hard to be able to have the power and the clarity to be able to make a difference in the way that we want. Hey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a lot of that starts with ourselves too. It's not just acceptance of the things we don't like in other people, but also being able to radically look at yourself with honesty and be able to also accept the parts of ourselves that we've maybe been programmed to feel ashamed of, and the stuff that we stick into our shadows or try to believe isn't who we are, and the more we can kind of learn to accept ourselves and be in harmony with ourselves, I think that also ripples out into how we treat other people, and then it's really like the microcosm of ourselves ripples out into the macrocosm of the world at large.
Yeah, truly. Yeah, it's big.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom. If you have any closing statements, we have probably a few more minutes left. But thanks so much for everybody that's been tuning in, and thank you, Tahir, for your time and for inspiring all of us today.
Yeah, pleasure. It looks like the last comment on there, as far as what I can see on my Virgin experience of Instagram, is that Lal8694 is requesting Mankunta Mola. So here's just a minute of Mankunta Mola. I can't give you the whole
Okay.
thing. This is the oldest Qawwali song, apparently. Ah, Meine canto mala hai, meine canto mala mala Thanks for requesting that.
Hmm.
Just a taste.
Wow. Thank you, bro. That was
Yeah,
amazing.
pleasure. Pleasure.
All right.
Yeah, thanks
All
for
right,
having me,
bro.
Jake.
Dude, my pleasure. Be well. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, lots of love. We'll see
Much
you
love.
soon.
The Quarantine Sessions podcast with J. Cole.